We are continuing the summer vibes, looking at where the Orlando Magic could go wrong and the questions they still have to answer. Jason Beede of the Orlando Sentinel back on the show today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is July 29th, 2025. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com, credentialed member of the Orlando Magic media since the 2012 season. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to continue talking with Jason Beede of the Orlando Sentinel as we continue our summer vibe check. As the Orlando Magic enter this new phase where everything is heightened, all the expectations are present, and where the Magic still have questions to answer. We're going to get to all of that on what might be our last part. Again, I record this before I do the editing, so we might have one more episode with Jason Beede coming up, but we're going to get to the meat of the conversation on today's episode. If you missed the first part, go listen to yesterday's episode. But before we do any of that, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. We truly appreciate all of our Orlando Magic dailies who listen to every episode of Locked On Magic 5 days a week. Like I said, we're in our summer schedule right now. That means we may not go 5 days a week every week for a little bit, but we're still going to be pumping out episodes of Locked On Magic. So make sure you are subscribed, whether it's on the podcast version, the audio version, or on YouTube. Find out wherever you download podcasts. The Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day. I don't want to take up too much time because the longer I take here, the less of the interview I give you, and then we have to save some of it for later. Let's get back to it with Jason Beede of the Orlando Sentinel. And to that point, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more here. To that point, it feels like people forget how good this Magic team can be. Yeah. Like they were 41-41 last year, and it honestly feels like a minor miracle that they got there. Not just because they had the great finish of the season. They finished 12-6 over the last 18 games. You know, after that terrible homestand, they really kind of galvanized and figured themselves out. And you got to give them credit for that. And winning the division, getting the 7 seed, winning that play-in tournament game, like that was a high pressure game.
That was a big deal. That was a big deal.
Big win. But like it feels like people forget how injured they were last year. Like even some of the conversations about Paolo, if you take out that month, like after he came back from the injury,
right,
like he shot 46, 47, 48% from the floor, was like 29 points per game on 48% shooting. You could quibble with maybe some of the shot selection and some of the decision making, but like I find, he shot 45% from the floor. It was a little bit worse than he was in 2024 during the 2025 season. And that includes a January where he was just shooting low 40s and couldn't do anything because it was just clear he wasn't quite in playing shape yet.
Yeah.
So I get the feeling that like either people feel like Paolo and Franz are somehow like very injury prone, which is silly because like Franz missed 15 games in his first 3 seasons and Paolo missed 12 in his first 2. Like they don't miss games. Those guys don't miss games. I'm not worried about them playing like 75 games. Like Paolo's going to be eligible.
Came back and look like he hadn't, like nothing happened, by the way.
Yeah.
Like where Paolo was a little bit slower to got back, Franz got back and,
minus his 3-point shooting, which is another issue entirely. But I almost feel like, and so like, this is, I think, where to start. I almost feel like the Magic looked at their playoff performance and said, okay, allowing for the injuries we faced and everything else we faced, we're not good enough right now to compete with a championship level team like Boston. Like, I mean, let's be real. Like, I don't know how you feel about this. This is how I feel. If Drew Holiday doesn't miss games 3, 4, and 5, if he doesn't miss game 3, that's a sweep. Like Orlando wasn't getting a win. And like games 3 and 4 were both very, very competitive, very close games. Jason Tatum is clearly like a maturity level above where Paolo is. And Paolo is going to probably watch game 4 a million times and say like, I made this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. Tatum did this, this, and this. That's where I need to get. And that's good for him. Boston made all the shots in the Magic series that they missed in the New York series. So like, I'm not even like them losing in the second round is like not some crazy thing. It's like that they made the shots Orlando wanted them to take. Orlando's defense, despite the numbers, I thought held up very, very well. But I feel like the Magic looked at that series and was like, we're not good enough to compete for a championship. And that's where we need to get, because we are much closer than our record indicates because of all the injuries we faced. We've got the defense. If we're just a little bit better on offense, if we're just league average on offense, we could compete. I don't know if you've seen, I know I showed you this stat at various points during the season. I think the Athletic NBA show noted this too. The Magic were like 27-10 when they shot 33% from three.
And that's not even league average.
That still would be worse than the league.
Yeah.
Like 33, like Washington was like 33-7 at 29th. Like they could be the worst 3-point shooting team in the league, and it would have been enough. They were just so bad.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing where, from a national perspective, for people who don't watch every single game or watch the Magic and have watched the Magic for multiple years like we have, it's wow, Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones, that doesn't seem like a Kevin Durant or a major addition like that. But when you actually look at the numbers, like you said, this year and the year before, they were so good when they shot not league average from three, just a little bit better than what they were shooting. So let alone league average. Like, I think people don't realize just how bad, like the average casual fan nationally might not realize how bad Orlando's offense was, but also just little shifts here and there. Some nights were better than others. Just how much a little bit better can really unlock the offense for them and help Paolo and Franz and Jalen out. And I think when you just need a little bit and you add major additions like Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones, it can really be I don't want to say explosive, but it can be an improved offense, which, I don't think you necessarily, yes, KCP was important on defense, but you didn't give up a lot of defense. And you're adding a player like Desmond Bane who can hold his own. But when you get back Jalen Suggs and Franz and Paolo, after a healthy offseason, it can be a really dangerous defense as well. And, just natural improvement and natural growth and stuff. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it works. But you're right. The bar is extremely low. And I think when you look at that Celtics series, if Jalen and Paolo and Franz were healthier or had missed fewer games and Jalen had come back or whatever, they wouldn't have been in that series anyways. Like, they would have been maybe the 5th or the 6th seed, a little bit higher. Because I still think even if they had missed fewer games, or let's say Paolo came back and was in shape and they won some of those games, they didn't have that awful trip out west. So they didn't have that pitiful home stretch where they, just dropped some really bad games.
They lost 3 games at a homestand by 5 total points, I think it was, but still, like, they were losses to the Raptors.
So they wouldn't have been in that position, right?
Yeah.
And this is all hypothetical.
That's the point. Yeah.
What we saw in that Boston series was, even if Jalen was in that series, they needed more. They needed more on offense. And sure, Paolo proved that he's a playoff riser and should garner more respect nationally. He's getting some of that this summer. And I think they just realized this team is not good enough right now. And, who knows what the next team's going to look like. But, the regular season stuff, it kind of reminds me of even a couple of years ago when they played Cleveland, that weird how they closed the regular season with those losses on the road. It came down to that last game. If that team was a little bit more mature and a little bit older, maybe they would have been the 4th seed and hosted, and who knows what would. If
they were a little bit more mature and a little older, they would have done what Houston did this season and would have been the 2 or the 3 seed. Because remember, They were, after they beat the Bulls that Sunday, they were the 2 seed in the East, if I'm not mistaken. They were at least a 3 seed in the East at that point. And it was look, when the schedule came out in August, we knew that Houston, Milwaukee back-to-back was going to be tough. Like, I think we all marked that Milwaukee game as a loss from just the get-go. Philadelphia was always going to be tough, and that was before they got super hot, which they were at the end of that season. And then we looked at that Milwaukee closing, final game of the regular season, was like, that's, unless Milwaukee's clinched the 2 seed or the 1 seed or whatever, that's going to be really, really tough.
So
and
to your
so
point,
like we knew
when you look at that stretch, right, a couple of years ago,
yeah.
And then you look at some of those games where maybe if they hadn't been as hurt as they would have been, and you talk about people not realizing or maybe even forgetting how good this team can be. I think when you combine that with the fact that the front office realized this team is not good enough, the pieces around Paolo, Franz, and Jalen are not good enough. And then you look at the pieces they added in Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones. It has the potential to be really special for sure.
Let's take a quick break from our conversation, tell you a little bit about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick energizing shot. Whether you're seeking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need an extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know with how hot it is right now in Central Florida, just being outside exhausts you. It is so oppressively hot. I'm getting the warnings on my phone about how hot it is. You need energy to get through your day, just to get from one place to the other, it feels like. That's where 5 Hour Energy comes in. Being outside this summer is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36 or just being outside at all right now, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order Transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. To that point then, the Magic have not been hiding what their ambitions are. Like, Jeff Weltman who very rarely speaks publicly, has been, we're not interested in just winning the East. We want to win the whole thing. We want to win like he said it, we want to win the NBA. They're obviously, again, we're not going to dive into cap stuff, but they're going to be a second apron team in 2027. If the Magic's accountants, if Pete D'Alessandro is not calculating the Magic as giving Paolo that 30% Rose Rule max, they're idiots. Like, I'm sorry. I'll flat out and say that if they're not, if they did not,
I think they are. I think we can give.
I think they are. I think it's pretty safe to say they are. But like, again, I think I would argue, and I don't know how you feel about this, I don't think they would have given Franz the full max if they knew that the cap was only going to projected to be to rise by 7% next year.
Yeah, that was definitely.
I am not convinced. I'm convinced that number is a low ball projection. I think the NBA is covering themselves because they don't know what's going to happen with some of these revenue things. But we're not here to talk about cap stuff. We'll save cap stuff for another day. It's important. You need to know it, but we'll save it for another day. How do you think this team is going to handle now this added pressure, these expectations? I mean, and look, I don't think anyone's expecting the Magic to go out and win a championship this year. But very, very clearly, the Magic are telegraphing and saying publicly in a way that they haven't said publicly, this is where we want to go. And now they're paying this team like they're going to do it. They're going to do it. Like, how do they handle these expectations now? Because frankly, if this team loses in the first round in 2026, that feels like a massive failure. Barring circumstances like what happened, but barring context, like that feels like that would be a massive failure.
I think Paolo said the same thing. I think Paolo literally said that if they exit again out of the first round, that would be really disappointing. I will say this. There are a lot of fans on social media and some of the national media as well that think this team has an easy route to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think that exists. I don't think for any team there's easy in the playoffs. Like
Cleveland thought that.
That's why they're the playoffs, right? Cleveland thought that. Houston thought that. Like there's no such thing as easy in the playoffs. So it's interesting how you have on one hand all these roster improvements and internal growth and health and coaching staff improvements. Like on paper, they upgraded their roster and their staff, right? On the other hand, this is a team outside of Desmond and Tyus. You look at the core pieces that are returning, the guys that are coming back, and the coach that's coming back and his staff. Not only have they not won a playoff series yet under Jamahl Mosley, they also haven't even won a playoff game on the road, right? So I'm not saying we should lower the expectations for this team, right? Especially when you consider Halliburton and Tatum and the rest of the East and what the Bucks are doing and no more Lillard and the rest of the East and whatnot. And Atlanta got better too. I'm not saying you necessarily have to lower the expectations, but I think maybe be a little bit more realistic. And I'm not also saying on the other hand, if they win a first round series, it should be celebrated as if they just got over a huge mountain, right? My point is it's still on the checklist of things that are unchecked. They still haven't won a playoff game on the road, which is not easy. And in order to win a series, unless you're the home team, your home court advantage, you're in a 7-game series, you go best of 7, you never have to win on the road, which is what we saw Cleveland do to Orlando a couple of years ago. You're going to have to win one on the road to win a series, right? Most of the time. That's what good teams, great teams do. They win on the road. And we haven't seen that, let alone a series. So nothing comes easy in the playoffs. I think on the other hand, though, is we all agree another first-round exit, you're looking at some serious decisions that have to be made, both financially and on a coaching perspective. I'm not saying this team should be in the finals this upcoming year, but they should definitely be within reach of the Eastern Conference Finals. They should be out of the first round. And depending on the matchup in the second round and the health and all those other extenuating circumstances, absolutely. This team on paper, the improvements both internally as guys get older and grow closer to their prime, and then you look at the additions that they made, it's one of those things where it's interesting to see how those improvements are going to help guys like a Paolo and Franz and Jalen win their first playoff series, win their first playoff game on the road, which again is something this core has not done yet.
Yeah. And like
that's
you mentioned,
just the reality.
It's things they have to check off. I always say this: you don't know you can do something until you do it. I've been very much of the opinion, like getting to the playoffs against Cleveland in 2024 was, okay, go through a playoff race, get your taste of the playoffs, getting to a game 7 and going through the ups and downs of that series. That felt like gravy for that team. That felt like, this team is a little bit better than we maybe thought and gave them credit for. And like a criticism that I've had of Jeff Waltman is I think he's been so patient that he doesn't realize how good the team he has is and didn't maximize some of those years perhaps. And again, if you do any of that, you don't get Desmond Bane. And maybe that proves history right, that being patient was the right call. Exactly. Who knows? I'm not complaining. It was a great season and did everything they needed to do. Last season to me was about, okay, win a playoff series, get to play a team like the Boston Celtics and see what you actually need to win a championship, to get to the next level. And so Orlando obviously didn't win the playoff series, but they got into the series with the Celtics and learned precisely what they needed to learn. And so, expectations rightfully raise every single season, every single time through the playoffs. And now you want to be hungry for more. You don't want to be satisfied with where you're at.
And I think the team showed that when they made that playoffs the first year and they were facing Cleveland. We all went in the locker room. They had beers and hats and shirts, and it was a party in there. And then when they got to the playoffs this year, obviously the circumstances were a little bit different with all the injuries and
they had to go through the play.
It felt like this is exciting, but we've done this before. There was nothing like, I remember even after they won at home to extend the series, at least the game, Jamahl Mosley said, this isn't, we're happy obviously, but this isn't worth celebrating because this isn't something we haven't done yet.
He said it plainly, like we did what we were expected to do. Like,
right. That's what it was.
Start
exactly.
till the road team wins. We defended our home court. They defended theirs. Like,
right. And I think, again, to your point, if the year before was about making the playoffs, this past year was about winning first round series. Obviously, once those injuries happened, the way things went down with Jalen and then Mo as well, that was just about, let's see, like that perspective changed from let's win a first round series this season to let's see how much fight and grit this team has. And they show that on the stretch that there is still, heart and hustle in this team, this core that they did, they didn't just quit on the season, right?
No.
Even though they dealt with serious injuries that I think, to your point, a lot of people do forget just how hurt they were. And not saying that makes excuses, because even if they were healthy, I think we've said this before, those roster issues still existed, hurt or healthy, still existed. And that's why they went out and did what they did, because they knew even with Jalen, it's not like they were getting another game or let alone winning the series against Boston.
If the way I would put it is, if the Magic were healthy, they would have been in the fight for 4, 5, 6.
They would have been higher. For sure.
I'm not saying they would have. They could have still ended up 7th. Detroit was very good. Like give Detroit their flowers. They were very, very good. They might beat Milwaukee if they're the 4 or 5 seed. They might beat New York. I'm skeptical of that with the way their offense runs, but they would have run into a team that would have taught them, like, oh, this is what a winning team does. Like, the only of those group of teams, the only team I would say Orlando 100% should beat this team in a playoff series is Detroit. Again, no offense to Detroit. Love them. They were great this season.
But they were young and they weren't ready.
Young.
They were like Orlando a year before.
Exactly. And all that. Like, I would expect Orlando to, give a competitive series to Milwaukee. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. Indiana, like, Orlando seems to be Indiana's kryptonite. I don't think people necessarily realize that. Like, Orlando defends Indiana better than any team in the league, but playoff Indiana is a different animal. And I would have loved to, I would still love to see that series. I think that would be a fun rivalry. Let's move then to the other big move that we haven't discussed in full yet. With the front office doing all these things, I do think the pressure now shifts fairly or unfairly to Jamahl Mosley. And I thought Mike Bianchi wrote a really good column in the Orlando Sentinel. Your colleague Mike Bianchi wrote a really good column about this. I know I have commented on this as well. And it's not like the seat is blazing hot for Jamahl Mosley, but now he has to kind of prove himself a little bit and prove that he can maximize the tools that he's been given by Jeff Weltman, by ownership with all the money that they're spending now. He went out and added 2 new coaches in God Shamgod and Joe Prunty. You've talked to him more directly about both of these hires. What do they hope that they've added in these 2 coaches, and how much of an impact can a little bit of coaching staff shakeup? It's not like huge, obviously, like Jesse Mermis left for Phoenix, obviously, but how much can that change the direction the Magic are going?
Yeah, I think it shows that Jamahl looked in the mirror and he realizes that he needed to improve himself. And you talk about God Shamgod and his player development, and everybody immediately went to, this is going to help Anthony Black so much. This is going to help Jalen Suggs so much. I think he's going to help Paolo Banchero so much. His handle at times, especially when he first came back from injury, we saw the turnovers, just the ball bouncing off his foot, lost control of the ball. I think that's going to help him a lot, even though he's obviously is a high level all NBA caliber type player. And then I think from an offensive standpoint with Joe Prunty, like he's won championships. He's been an interim head coach. Like he knows what it takes. And when I talked with Jamahl about their roles, he wasn't too specific, right? But he also basically said these are both offensive guys and they're both offensive minded coaches. It seemed like to me that God Shamgod is going to be helping more on the scouting side and the player development side, where Joe, I think, is going to be more involved in what they're actually running on the court offensively, which I think, I wasn't around when Nate Tibbetts was here. I was right when that first season, the first couple of weeks when we got into it, was when Tibbetts left. So I can't speak to what that relationship was like. But what I do know is that he didn't replace him. And we saw time and time again, whether it was timeouts, late game situations, some of the offensive play calls, a lot of people like to say they don't call plays. They do. They're just not very creative. They're not very, they're very, it kind of reminds me of like RPO offensive football, like very, if this, then that, then this, then that.
It's read based. It's
not very read based. It's not very, here's this really complicated play. And on occasion we would see that, of course, but I think you add two things. You add elite experience in Joe Prunty, and that was something that Jamahl was lacking. I mean, obviously he had been an assistant for so long, but in terms of head coaching experience, he hasn't done this very long. And I think his staff is lacking that, right? You look at staffs around the league, and how many times did they face teams where it was like the head coach was the head coach, and then you had such a familiar name on that staff. It was like, wow, that guy's an assistant for him. That's a big time hire. And they didn't. I mean, all due respect to the assistant coaches, they're all great guys. We know them. Coach Oz is great, and Jesse's going to be missed, and Amir got a great opportunity at Summer League, and you go down the list. But I think adding Joe Prunty on there with his experience, I think it says a lot about Jamahl, and I think it says a lot about his staff. And the reality was they needed someone like that. And then when you talk about from a player development standpoint, internal growth only happens if you're dedicated to it. And I think the players themselves, they all put in the work in the gym. They all, we've seen Jonathan Isaac, we've seen Anthony Black, we've seen Jalen Suggs, and on in the gym this summer, whether in Orlando or in Vegas. I think adding a guy like him, I got to watch him work with Jace Richardson on the campus of UNLV during a couple of the practices. It seemed like, he really is into it as a player development coach. And you look at the guys he's worked with, from Luka to Kyrie, like they really got a big time hire away from Dallas. Like you talk about all these things that the Magic have done this offseason. That's like, wow, they're really going for it. And I think, again, it's all on paper, but it really says a lot about the self-reflection for Jamahl Mosley. And I think rightfully so. To Bianchi's point, there only are 30 of these jobs, right, as an NBA head coach. So Bianchi was making the point that they're all in the hot seat to some degree, as we've seen. Yeah. Coach of the year, okay, you're out within 2 years. And I think we've joked that maybe Jamahl didn't want to, he got second or third place a couple of years ago. Maybe he dodged a bullet winning it. But I think absolutely, if as we said before, if they're in a first-round exit again, I'm not saying that's going to be the call, but I think – maybe his seat is warm right now, where next season it could be blazing hot. And when you talk about ownership spending money and diving into that, you talk about the aprons and what they're going to be going into, what they're heading towards. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't want to say the clock is ticking, but it's certainly starting to tick a little bit for Jamahl Mosley, because I think they have all the pieces, right? I think Jeff Waltman even said it when they introduced Tyus Jones, when we talked to Jeff for the fourth time this summer. You talk about a guy who's not in front of the mic a lot. We spoke to Jeff a lot, which you don't see a lot, which you got to appreciate his openness to talk with us. But I think he said himself, he's done his part. It's up to the players and the coaches now. He's given them the resources. The ownership has given them the resources. And now it's up to the team and the coaching staff to say and go out and do this. And what that looks like, we'll see. But I think the additions, the type of additions, not just the fact that they made an addition, but they got an experienced coach in Prunty, and they got a really well-known player development coach in God Shamgod, who has an awesome name, by the way. I think it says a lot about what they actually want to do and how everybody is involved. Everybody involved is aligned on doing it to the best of their ability.
Yeah. And look, Mose is not hiding from it either. Like he said it several times over the course of the offseason. Pressure is a privilege. Like you feel that pressure because you've earned it.
There's expectations.
The team believes it needs to accomplish goals. And this is, as much as the Magic are a friendship team and all about the vibes. This is a results business. Like there's a winner and loser every night in this league. And you're judged on your wins and blamed for your losses. And so that pressure's there. I want to thank Jason Beede once again for coming on the show. I am pretty sure, again, I record this beforehand, so if the interview isn't over yet, we'll finish that up on our next episode of Locked On Magic. But I want to thank Jason Beede once again for coming on the show. You can, again, check him out on Twitter @TheRealBeede. You can check him out on Blue Sky Blue. That's also @TheRealBeede, Beede. You can also check out all of his great work at the Orlando Sentinel. Always the first place to go for Orlando Magic information and breaking news, as I am not much of a news breaker. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You can, of course, find me on Twitter @PhilipRR_OMD and on Blue Sky @PhilipRR. You can subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places you download podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest, you can also check us out on YouTube. Search for Locked On Magic. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, still trying to go strong, even though we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, you can check out my Patreon page, your Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. I know we talked a lot in this episode about the impact Tyus Jones is going to have on this team. You can find a video. It is pinned to the top of the Patreon page, a video breaking down how Tyus Jones gets his assists. You can find that again at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. We've still got a lot planned for the rest of the week here on Locked On Magic. I want to get back into a little bit of Franz Wagner and the improvements we're expecting to see from him in Eurobasket. I want to get to a little bit about Goga Batadze. I want to get to a little bit more about the impact Desmond Bane is going to have on this team. We still have a lot to talk about as we count down the next 2 months until training camp begins. But that's going to do it for today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Now that you're done listening to us, go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason, and Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic. This has been Philip Ross. Mike. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.